I'd like to bring this meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge and a moment of silence. We have a roll call vote, Terry?
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Here.
Dr. Faulkner.
Here.
Dr. Green.
Here.
Mrs. Heater.
Here.
Mr. Huron. Mr. Reichard.
Here.
Mr. Vognetz.
Here.
Mr. Brookhart.
Here. 1.3, the minutes from the October 9th, 2023 school board meeting. The board will take action to approve the meeting minutes from the October 9th, 2023 board meeting as presented. Can we get a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
I'm sorry, who's second?
I did.
Questions, comments, discussion? Okay, Terry?
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 2.1, reports, Finance and Budget Committee. Mr. Vognetz.
We did not hold one this past month due to no quorum.
Okay. Academic Affairs, Mrs. Heater.
Sure, we didn't have one this month or on October 11th, but on September 13th, we did talk about the district September diagnostic assessment. We talked about advanced placements, participation, how they'd like more students to have that opportunity. We talked about the high school schedules possibly adding another period. And we talked about how the middle school reading needs were being met by Kristen Beyer, which is awesome. And we also discussed curriculum reviews and why it was tabled with the non-evidence-based components.
Questions? Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Reichard.
Yes, Building Grounds, we had a little meeting, putting together some specifications for an RFP to go out to explore control switches to allow us to locally monitor and adjust our HVAC system with possibly save us some money and time before we have to get into a new system. If it gets down to road much further, well, we may have to look at something price-wise and some people. Thank you.
Any comments, questions for Mr. Reichard? Athletics and Extracurricular Activities Committee, Ms. Cooper.
I actually forgot all my notes. Richard, can you help out?
Yeah, we had a meeting on November 2nd. We discussed the fall sports success, also the scoreboard update, middle school lacrosse, athletic Hall of Fame update. We will see some further information on that on the agenda. The PHAC geography, the track and field maintenance, girls lacrosse resignation. We did have some public comment about possibly a survey starting for softball, middle school softball. It is a fall sport. 17 out of the 19 schools in the PHAC have it. And then also there is, I believe, 17 children for 8th grade volleyball club. And that's all.
Okay. Questions, comments? Health and Wellness Committee, Dr. Green.
We're only meeting quarterly, so there was no meeting.
Okay, thank you. VOTEC, Mr. Clauser.
New superintendent has started, and there's really not much to pass on, with the exception of what I talked about before. You really ought to go up and take a look at that VOTEC. What a difference. And I think kids are going to take a better interest in it now that it looks like a school. It looks like a professional type building, and if you have the opportunity, swing in up there and take a look at that place now.
Okay, thank you. CSIU, Dr. Faulkner.
Yes, we met, and one of the things that there was a highlight section of kids who attended the Pennsylvania Governor's School. And it wasn't someone from a Danville district, but it's an opportunity that's available to students. And the student who went came back and basically presented to the whole board, and it was amazing, incredible learning experience and opportunity. So something I think for Danville students could be a really cool and unique learning opportunity. I mean, they got crash courses in physics and chemistry and all sorts of things that they sort of goes above and beyond and really highlights a diverse academic experience, I think. Ongoing trainings offered by the CSIU for youth mental health first aid, QPR, suicide prevention training. We've taken, Dr. Anita's taken the initiative of passing that on. We've had several folks go through that, and they will continue to offer those over the next couple of years. This is for the community as well. So this is, you can do train the trainer, people who are trained to train other people, but you also can, any community member in our region who's interested in youth mental health first aid or suicide prevention training. I'm going to say that every time because it's going to be available on a continual basis and available to the public.
All right, thank you. EITC, Mr. Huron isn't here. I don't believe anybody else would have information on that at this point, would we? No? Okay. And Head Start, Mr. Reichard.
Yes, in Head Start, we had a meeting up at the Pine Barn Inn. They had election of officers, and they needed a president, vice president, and I believe a secretary. That went well. There was people volunteered for the work, which turned out good. Linda also presented a great screen graph showing how the kids are doing mathematically, literature, just like we showed here prior of the meeting before. It's quite interesting to see whether they're struggling and whether they're not struggling, and I think math's one of the strongest ones that's
Okay.
struggling in math.
All right. Thank you. The CS Trust, Mr. Sokolowski.
We had a meeting on October the 23rd. The usual financial reports were discussed and approved, not to exceed funding for budgeting purposes for the 24-25 year was discussed. We voted on the Pennsylvania Trust stop-loss premium. Conrad Siegel was there speaking on the various drugs and so forth, and how the trust is seeing increases in various areas of different types of drugs and so forth. Open enrollment is taking place, and that was about it.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Good evening. I'd like to start by just acknowledging some board members that this will be their last meeting with us. So Mr. Clauser, Mrs. Cooper, Dr. Faulkner, and Mr. Huron, who's not with us this evening. It is just a tremendous gift to the school district and the community to serve in this role. So thank you for all of the time and energy that you poured. I really appreciate it. On behalf of all of the district, I'd like to just thank you for your time. And certainly excited to have other folks back. I think election results get certified here shortly, so we'll know officially, but I think we'll see a lot of faces back again with us on December 4th at our reorganization meeting. But thank you again for your service. In December, we're also going to be inviting students to recognize them for fall achievements. So just certainly a quick shout out to our Hammers Mountain Biking Club and our girls cross country team, who are both state champions. We also have some other folks from fall events that have represented the district at states. So we'll be inviting those members of the school district community to come and be recognized at the December meeting. And we'd like to do that throughout the year at the conclusion of kind of each season or portion of the year for both our athletics and extracurriculars. And we're looking for some more opportunities to have students in front of the board. So in this new seating of the board, look for some of those things to happen. We'll move into enrollment this evening, and you'll see in parentheses our number from last month and then where we are today. So you're going to see really consistent numbers in terms of where we are here in the district at our 4 buildings, as well as VOTEC numbers did stay the same. If you go to the next screen, you'll also see fairly consistent non-public numbers for this school year as well. I have still included where we ended at the end of last year to where we are at this point this year. Mr. Ryan, if you take us to our next screen, The majority of our superintendent report this evening centers around curriculum and instruction, so I'll be turning this over to Mr. Moser, and certainly appreciate all the time and effort he's put into preparing information on these topics. So we want to present to you this evening information about high school AP Capstone, which is a program we'd like to start here at Danville High School and want to provide the board with information about that. We want to talk about kindergarten through 8th grade math curricular resources, what the curriculum approval process looks like and where we are, an update on that. We have just gotten our building level scores, and so want to share those, and also want to share our PVOS growth scores. So we have previously shared our PSSA achievement results, but tonight we'll be sharing those growth scores. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Moser to share our curriculum and instruction information.
Thank you, Dr. Need. Yeah, please bear with me. There's quite a bit here. It's a lot of information. I will do my best to move through it expeditiously, but certainly if there are any questions, please stop me and ask. Our first topic is the high school AP Capstone program. Wanted to make the board aware and the public aware of exactly, first of all, what this is. We have started some conversations, and I'll kind of go over where we're at in that process administratively along with teachers. But if we can go to the next slide, please, Mr. Ryan. First, what is it? It's recognized by the College Board upon completion with a diploma, an actual AP Capstone diploma. Graduating with this diploma is highly regarded by competitive colleges and universities. It is certainly not for every student, but it is something that for the number of AP courses that we offer here in our success rates, it is something that kind of ties that all together as a program. And again, looks great on resumes for students when they are applying to highly competitive universities. So essentially, you have the AP Capstone Diploma, which means you take and pass 4 AP exams throughout high school and earn a score of 3 or higher. We have lots of students already doing that. In addition to those 4 AP exams throughout, what makes it the Capstone program are 2 new courses. One is AP Seminar, which is the first year that students, they can take other APs concurrently with that, but that is the first course usually taught in the English department in most schools who do it. So students would start with that, and then in year 2, they would take AP Research. And again, they would need to earn a score of 3 or higher on both of those, along with any other 4 AP exams. So what's very interesting about this is that, first of all, seminar usually taught by English department in most schools who have the AP Capstone program. The research course is often individually driven. So that is where a student self-selects their area of research, and by self-selecting, the schools typically will try to match them with what essentially is an advisor. So it is not everybody doing the same thing in class that we're so used to in public education. It is, I know what I'm interested in as an individual student. This is what I want to pursue. It goes through a sort of a refining process with your advisor, and then we schedule that in, but we have some flexibility in how that can be scheduled in. We have had some conversations about what that might look like, because so much of it is independently driven. So for anybody who's done a master's or even higher degrees, a lot of times you take courses where it is an independent research-based thing where you're touching base with an advisor on a somewhat frequent basis, but not every day. Certainly, that is not necessarily the case. That's what that course could look like. If we go to the next slide, so where we are is we have a slew of AP courses available that are some honestly very highly attended, some that are not, depending upon the program, the department, the course, and whatnot. But we would need to add that AP Seminar and that AP Research class. Specifically, probably in year 1, we don't need the research class in year 1 because no students are ready for it. We need the AP Seminar class in the first year that we roll this out, and then have a phased-in plan where in year 2, students would have access to the AP Research course. We have had discussions with the high school English department. There is a lot of interest. It became apparent very quickly on that they are interested in it. They recognize some challenges that we have to work through and some of the things that we need to do in order to get there. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that a lot of this legwork had been done in the district previously, where they had really looked into this, considered the ramifications and what it actually meant for students and teachers, all the way down to even scheduling. So the impact that it would have in the school. So the next steps really are kind of identifying, well, what do we need to get this in place? I know that those conversations here will be coming up very, very shortly. We'll continue those conversations with the English department to see how we could kind of embed that seminar course in our normal course of studies so that students wouldn't necessarily have to double up in an English course in any given year, and there are ways that you can do that. In most schools, what happens is they take the AP seminar course as sophomores. So we will be continuing those conversations here in short order, and by the turn of the calendar year, probably kind of make a decision about where are we going into next year, because I know Mr. Gump, Mr. Varholic are already working on course selection guides, so it's important that we get everything in place. But with that, what we don't want to do is plan that out and then have to haphazardly come back to AP Research the following year. So what we want to do is make sure we have a solid plan for phasing this in prior to rolling it out. So our next steps are really kind of, okay, when, how, and who. And we'll continue to update the board and the public as we go. Go to the next. Any questions about the AP capstone? Comments? Take it piece by piece. Might be the easiest way. K through 8 math curricular resources. Wanted to give an overview of what I mean by this, what we've done so far, and where we're at in this process as well. On the next slide, you'll see our current context. Essentially, what we have right now in K through 8, we have a contract with Curriculum Associates, and we use iReady Classroom. So those contracts expire at the end of the end of this school year for grades K through 5, and at the end of next school year for grades 6 through 8. So that means we need to look at, are we going to continue with this? Are we going to look at something different? Whatever that decision is, there's a process in place. Certainly, when we say this, we're looking at what are the resources that are going to best address our students' needs and get in the hands of teachers to make sure that we are closing gaps that we are currently seeing. If we go to the next slide, what we've done so far, first of all, we have met with all math leads across the district. That includes the primary school, Liberty Valley Middle School, and the high school teacher. The high school math lead also attended this meeting. Building principals were invited. That was really to discuss the process of reviewing resources. So putting it out there, getting it on the table, getting it at the forefront, and starting to have some conversations. All parties identified that consistency is key. That is our priority. That K through 8, regardless of what we go with, whether we remain utilizing iReady classroom materials, or if we make a move and try to go with something else, that it is consistent in K through 8. One caveat to that is it doesn't have to be all in one year, because the middle school contract still is in place for next year. So in middle school, we would still have that, because what we would do then is identify what it is that we want to do and phase it in appropriately across grade levels, so that we're not yanking it out of an 8th grader's hands, 8th grade teacher's hands, when we're still under contract for that. But it would allow us to make sure that we have the consistency moving forward in K through 8 and stagger the contracts as such, so that down the road you're not just making, you're not having to kind of make a jarring change at any given time. Our basic research, and I asked all the leads, and I myself looked into this, identified 5 math series to carefully review and consider. So the way that we identified these is that they all met the criteria on ed reports of being being highly rigorous, but also addressing PA standards and being in existence for K through 8. There are some programs only available K through 5. There are some that are only available through 6 through 8, so on and so forth. And with that consistency being identified as a priority, we kind of narrowed it down. And there are really 5 out there that address PA standards in any way, shape, or form in a K through 8 basis. And they are all listed. So what we have done is we have reached out to all of these companies and gotten samples for all of them except for one. The only one that has not come in yet as of today was Experience Mathematics. Envision Mathematics did come in today. So 4 out of the 5 that are out there and meet the criteria that we started with, we have in our hands, and we'll be getting those out to teachers in short order. On the next slide, you'll see that's the current status. So I've covered that already. If we can go to the next one. What this means down the road, process-wise. Departmentally, we will perform a comprehensive review of each of the resources. Each grade level band, along with administration, will conduct a standardized review process for each of these resources. That is, identifies strengths and weaknesses. And if you refer to Board Policy 108, you'll see there is actually a worksheet available there that we will utilize in order to do this. Once that committee, essentially your math leads and administration together, want to make a recommendation, we will provide materials at Academic Affairs Committee and for the public to review. Once a decision has been made at Academic Affairs, we'll provide the materials for the Board of Directors at large and for the public again to review before actually purchasing. At that point in time, obviously, revisions to scope and sequence may need to be made depending upon some series, move things around. And so we may need to then revise some of those math scope and sequence documents, or we may not. So any questions on K through 8 math?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for following a process.
So the curriculum approval process update as to where we are now district-wide. Next slide, you'll see over the last few months. And finishing in the next few months, we've been and will be working on new curricular scope and sequence documents per recommendations from PDE and continuing to bring them to the board for approval. We have brought many so far over the past couple of months, but the work is not yet done. We're also currently conducting a curriculum audit in an attempt to identify the last approvals made by the board for all grade levels and content areas. What I can tell you is that we have found a lot of documents from 2019, but have not yet been able to determine whether or not those documents that were created in 2019 were actually board approved. So continuing to look at those to see if they were actually board approved, if they went through that process. I don't have dates on any of that. Board docs only goes back to 2020, so it's going to be the old paper agendas and going through some files and folders to make sure. We are in the process of uploading all last approved curricular scope and sequence documents to the district website so that those will be public facing. And as the board continues to approve new curricular documents, we will continue to update said section of the website. There are some things there. Anything that has been board approved starting in August of 23 up until last meeting is on the website. What is missing is anything that is in second read right now, first read right now, or anything for which we have not had a first or second read passed. So just a key part, if we go to the next slide, we're really focusing on a standards aligned system. So what this means is those scope and sequence documents that we bring to the board are aligned to Pennsylvania's curriculum frameworks and demonstrate how each subject area and grade level plans to deliver instructional content, skills, and competencies, and how to assess students' progress on those skills and competencies. In addition to hosting scope and sequence documents on the website, as I just talked about on the last slide, you'll also see that we will be posting the Pennsylvania curriculum frameworks that are published by PDE. They identify essential content, big ideas, core competencies, and link to the standards. Mr. Ryan, I do have an example of the PA curriculum framework for kindergarten literacy. If you would please pull that up. Perhaps make it a little bigger. So in this document that PDE puts out on the SAS portal, the Standards Aligned System portal, they have all of these kind of together by grade level. What I'm doing right now is in the process of kind of pulling those through so that we have a document for each grade level in each content area. So here you see kindergarten literacy, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and then reading comprehension, vocabulary acquisition, and then writing. Embedded in writing, are, especially at kindergarten, are the speaking and listening skills as well, because they are precursors to writing, and really kind of, especially in kindergarten, they all weave together. Students need to be able to orally tell a story before we can ever expect them to actually sit down and take a pencil and write a story. They have to be able to do that. So these will be posted. These are literally straight from the state, straight from PDE. I'll be pulling them out and modifying them to fit our needs, but they'll be hosted on the website as well. Any questions about any of that? Fun stuff. So we move on to the Pennsylvania Act 13 building level scores. These were just released late last week. We have been able to actually put them, not only get our scores, but actually what we did is we pulled them out of the massive spreadsheet that the state sends out, which has every school building in the state. We sorted, pulled out CSIU 16, so we're also able to give our rankings at each academic level. First of all, just a little refresher or introduction for those of you who might not remember how the Act 13 building scores are determined. What you have is a combination of three things: academic achievement. They look at ELA, math, and science, and so you get a total number of points there of 40 for academic achievement. This is how many students score proficient or advanced on grade level PSSAs or Keystones. So that's the academic achievement part. If you remember, when we looked at academic achievement earlier this year, we had some areas of concern, specifically 3 through 5, but what you'll see is that, as we said, achievement was only one component, because the second component there is growth, and it's weighted just as much as achievement. So another 40 points for growth. And then you have other academic indicators. At the high school level, you take into account both attendance and graduation rates. Where graduation rates do not apply, which would be the middle school and Liberty Valley, the attendance rate counts for 20 points. So when we start talking about truancy and having processes in place for tracking kids down who aren't coming to school, this is, I think it's fantastic actually that the state holds us accountable to that, because otherwise, before this, a lot of schools were more than willing to, quite frankly, not do the work to chase kids down and get them to attend school regularly. We can't teach them if they're not here. Excuse me. So that's just kind of an overview of how these building level scores are calculated. If we could go to the next slide, you will actually see Danville's building level scores for 22-23, along with where that ranks in the CSIU. Now, I will explain why those numbers are all over the place and in the ranking area, but you see the building scores. First of all, Danville High School 79.8, Danville Middle School 69, and Liberty Valley 81.1. CSIU rankings, Danville High School was second in the IU. Danville Middle School 10th out of 14th. And the reason why you have fewer middle schools than high schools, there are a couple of schools that, well, first of all, CMA VTS does not have a middle school, and then Millville counts as either a junior, or it's labeled as junior, senior, high as one building, so we do not count it in middle school. Obviously, I made that decision. That's an editorial decision. It could go the other way if you really wanted it to. But then you see Liberty Valley 6th out of 23, because a lot of districts have more than one school. Please note, primary school does not get a building score, and that's because the only component out of those that they actually have on state measured exams are the attendance rate. So schools that do not have any testing data available do not get a building level score. We go to the next slide. PVOS growth scores, and this is where a bulk of information comes. And again, if you think back to those building level scores, the PVOS growth scores essentially compositely count for 40% of those building level scores. So we talked about achievement a couple of months ago. This is the equally important component of those scores that we really can look at and get a lot of information from. On the next slide, just an explanation. Unlike PSSA scores, which measure students' achievements, PVOS growth scores measure how much progress in an academic area a student has made in the span of time between tests. So you get growth scores for science, ELA, and math between grades 4 through 8, and then again after students take the keystones. Truthfully, PVOS scores are the best indicator we have of whether or not students closed academic achievement gaps. Because a student, and we kind of talked about this previously, a student who scores basic on PSSAs or keystones, that doesn't show up in that achievement, in those achievement numbers. However, that student could have come from below basic up to basic, or from the lower realms of the basic cut point to the higher realms of the basic cut point. So this truly is, personally, if I had to pick, where we want our strongest areas to be, I would say growth, because I think achievement is a lagging indicator of growth over time. So kind of important, very important information that we get. If we go to the next slide, the formula for PVOS calculates students' growth from one assessment to the next. For each student and each group, we can do it by entire grade level, subgroups, etc., identifies one solid year's worth of growth of what that is, and then measures the growth index. The growth index shows how closely to 1 year's worth of growth a student, a group of students achieves. Growth can be below or above or at 1 year's worth. And so you see that color line, and as educators, we kind of live in these colors. I've said that before, like teachers would know exactly what this is, administrators know exactly what these colors mean. If you look at that as essentially as a continuum, that dotted line right down the middle of green means exactly 1 year's worth of growth. So if a student falls there, they have grown exactly 1 year's worth according to the formula. You can see it going to the right. That's great. Multiple years in blue is how you actually close achievement gaps. You cannot close achievement gaps just by getting green over and over again, as we'll point out. If you are below that line and in the yellow or red, it means that student has gone through a year of school and has gained less than 1 year's worth of growth. And so that means the achievement gap is widening. Next slide, please. So again, I'll say the only way to close achievement gaps is to have multiple years worth of more than 1 year's worth of growth, because that benchmark on grade level continues to move. So as an example, if a third grade student scores below basic on PSSAs at the end of third grade, and that data suggests that student is on a first grade level, if this student were to grow approximately 1 year, that green dotted line in PVOS, in each of the next 3 grade levels, they would be finishing the 6th grade on a 4th grade level. So they have not actually closed that gap at all. They have maintained where they have been. Still well below. To completely close that gap, the student would need the next 3 years' average growth to be over a full year and a half on average per year. They would need that light blue area on the PVOS continuum for 3 years in a row as an individual student. That would close this particular example. If a student is on grade level and gains a full year's worth of growth consistently, so that dotted line in the green, in the middle of the green, that student would always be proficient and or advanced, depending upon what achievement category they were in to begin with. Essentially, consistent growth or lack thereof leads to predictable achievement. It's really, when we look at these things, we should not be shocked. If we go to the next slide, please. PVOS does provide a detailed analysis of each student's previous year of growth, as well as teacher-specific growth and grade level specific and building level specific growth, labeled under those categories. So from a systems perspective, we think first about, okay, where are we at in terms of a whole school? But then we begin to drill down process where we look at each grade and each subject within each school. And then as the building, administration continues to look, okay, where are we teacher specifically? If a teacher is demonstrating tremendous growth year after year after year, we want to find out exactly what it is that teacher is doing and make sure that we are encouraging replication of that. If a teacher is not showing consistent growth, we want to have some conversations about changing some practices potentially. And that's not to attack anyone. It is to say our students deserve nothing less. So if we're missing the mark, we need to try to figure out why we're missing the mark and how we're missing the mark and what we might be able to do differently or put in place. It could be a question of curriculum. It could be a question of instruction. It could be a question of assessment. Until we start paying attention and actually having those conversations about individual classes and individual students, we don't know exactly what the answer is. So for the results themselves, everybody feel like you got a crash course understanding if you didn't before? Overview of our PVOS scores in ELA. So this would be 4 through 8 and then again at Keystone Literature. You see 4 through 8 as a whole across grades falls right on the dotted line in the green. Almost nearly exactly 1 year's worth of growth. But if you start breaking that down by grade level, you see that 4th, 5th, 7th, and 8th are all above that level, with some of those grade levels being extremely above. Anytime you were in that dark blue, you're in like the sweet zone, quite frankly. But you see 6th grade well below. And if you look at the growth index, a -7, I'm not a math major, but a -7 is going to impact that average overall, which honestly brings it down to 0.01, essentially right at 1 year. If you took that out of it, that average goes way up. So clearly what this tells us is we have some concerns to address at 6th grade. Our next slide. Some diagnostics that dive into the data a little bit deeper. So what you're seeing here are five achievement groups. The groups represented to the left are your lowest achieving groups, which means on the left, those are students who probably scored below basic. But remember, they can still show growth. And that's critically important early on, all the way up through. All the way to the right would be your highest achieving students, broken up. So it's like every student who took ELA grade 4 PSSA is broken into exactly 5 quintiles of the same number of students in each quintile. And the bar graph shows how much those students actually grew academically in that content area. The green line represents exactly 1 year's worth. Anything above that is good. Anything below that should be concerning. So here you see in grade 4, our highest achieving group and our middle achieving group actually did not grow up to a year's worth, but our lowest achieving groups showed significant growth. And that mid-high group showed tremendous growth. We go to the next slide. In grade 5, you see above average growth in every single grade, or I'm sorry, in every single achievement group. Specifically, tremendous growth in our lowest, low, mid, and especially our middle achieving students showed a tremendous amount of growth. So while we looked at achievement scores and had some concern over proficiency rates at 4th and 5th grade, the reality is their growth was pretty strong overall, which led to that high building score. We go to the next slide, please. Remember, grade 6 was in the red. So that green line is 1 year's average worth of growth. You see that there is not a single achievement group that met the growth measure of 1 solid year. And you see what, quite frankly, concerns us even more than not seeing growth is that our lowest achieving groups actually grew the least, which means for those students who were already behind grade level, got further and further behind. Our next slide, ELA grade 7. Most of them closer to that 1 year average, but with the exception of low mid and our highest achieving groups who showed a tremendous amount of growth. The others slightly below, but none of them meet 1 standard error of measurement. That's pretty close, which would lead to the light blue that we saw in the 7th grade overall. The next slide is ELA grade 8. And remember, this was the dark blue, where they actually had to add an extra bubble because of the amount of growth seen. You see that the group that grew the least was actually your middle performing, and everybody else went tremendously. Next slide, please, is literature. And actually here, our highest achieving group saw the least amount of growth. Everybody else did see a good amount of growth over 1 standard error measurement because it jumps from 0 to 2. But our lowest students showed a tremendous amount of growth. This data can always tell different stories, and you can always interpret it differently. To me, this is one where I actually think this ties in to why we should move forward with the AP capstone program, because our highest achieving students actually spent 10th grade, probably could have been our highest achieving students at the end of 9th grade and taken AP seminar as sophomores. Does that make sense? Okay. We'll go through math now. You see the overview of PVOS scores, and you see across grade levels in the yellow. You see individual grade levels, though, when you break it down. 4th grade, pretty strong. 5th grade, incredibly strong. 6th grade, well below. 7th grade, very strong. And 8th grade, below. Again, averaged out across grades. You're in the yellow. And then you see Keystone Algebra there just about right on the dotted line. So this would be all students who took Keystone Algebra. That would include high school students and middle school students who took Keystone Algebra. We look at grade level breakdowns of those same achievement groups. On the next slide, it starts with 4th grade. Everybody close to the middle except for the mid-high and the highest, and you flip the script on them. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it certainly is something that is worth investigating the individual students who fall into those categories, which we have begun to do. The next slide, please. Tremendous growth in every group, from the lowest to the highest achieving students. Kudos to 5th grade math. They absolutely slayed this. 6th grade math is on the next slide. And you see the complete opposite of 5th grade, quite frankly. This is a concerning graph. There's not one achievement group who did not one achievement group who met close to the growth standard. Next slide, please. 7th grade. You see our lower performing students did not meet it, but our mid-high and highest did. Middle pretty much right there. That is like a mirror image almost of one side of the graph to the other. And then if we look at math in 8th grade, you see once again our lowest performing, lowest achieving group by far grew the least throughout the course of that year. Mid-high, little, discrepancy, the other three groups pretty close to that 1 year's worth. Again, please remember, if they come in below grade level and they don't meet a year's worth of growth, they're further below grade level than where they started. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Take you to Keystone Algebra. Again, sort of a mirror image from one side of the graph to the next. Please remember they landed right on the dotted line in the overall growth, which makes sense when you look at these results. And then we'll move on to science with the last piece here. Overview of the PVOS. Now, once again, I'll point out 4th and 8th grade because that is when they actually test in science. I've been privy to a lot of conversations regionally and even around the state. The 4th grade growth in science is based on students' 3rd grade performance in math and ELA. So it's not specific because there is no science test in 3rd grade. And so a lot of times, a lot of schools see very similar results to this where the science growth looks very low in 4th grade, and then they have like a turnaround when it comes to 8th grade. That's not uncommon, but very strong results there in 8th grade and in the Keystone Biology exam. And we can look at the achievement groups as well for science. Next slide. 4th grade. And then the next slide in 8th grade. There's our middle students who are not hitting the growth that we would like to see. And then you look at Keystone Biology, where our low-mid students, tremendous amount of growth. Remember, please also recall they have very high achievement scores as well. All right, next slide, and I am almost done. There is a gap in looking at PVOS to understanding achievement scores. So we want to kind of take a few minutes to go through this. The gap that remains in the utilization of PVOS to understand our achievement scores rests in the inability to consider growth related to 3rd grade PSSAs because 3rd grade's the first year they take it. So we can't measure their growth against anything in PVOS itself. However, one way that we can help fill this gap is by using CDTs. So we have started using CDTs this year. We kind of talked about it last spring. We talked about it over the summer. We actually put it out there at the beginning of this school year. CDTs are aligned to the PSSAs and are available for reading, math, and science and any Keystone exam subjects. So CDTs do provide you with a scale score with standardized scores that you can then apply to beginning of the year results in 3rd grade to determine students' beginning grade level placements. So essentially what I mean by that is that when students take that CDT at the very beginning of 3rd grade, when they first walk in the door in 3rd grade, very beginning of the year, we can basically determine closely, maybe not completely accurately, where they were leaving 2nd grade. How prepared were they for 3rd grade? So it's a sliding scale score that you can then apply to end of 2nd grade. If we look ahead to the next slide, please, you'll see our 3rd grade beginning of the year CDT results. So these are students, really only a few weeks of instruction in math and reading when they took these. You see in 3rd grade math, the red represents below grade level. Blue represents basically advanced, above grade level, and green is on grade level. So those pie charts and those numbers are very small, so I do apologize for that, but we have encapsulated it on the next slide as well. If we go to the next slide, essentially what we are seeing this year is that nearly 40% of our 3rd grade students entered Liberty Valley below grade level in reading, and about 60% of our third grade students entered Liberty Valley below grade level in math. Important to look at. We only have 1 year's worth of this right now, but what we're essentially looking at is by the end of third grade, all of these students will take PSSAs in both the ELA and math. We should be able to actually kind of ascertain a pretty good idea of how much growth third grade teachers netted by working with those students in the ways that they're working. Any questions or comments? That's a lot, I know.
These include like results from our cyber kids, homeschool kids, even the Amish school kids? And
It would not include homeschool or
Parochial.
non-public. No, these are only Danville Area School District students. We do try to proctor CDTs to our cyber students, our in-house cyber students, because they count in our PSSA scores too.
Next, you will see I sent board members electronically, and you'll also have them physically in your board packets, reports from our administrators, so you can get a stronger sense of what's happening in each of our departments, as well as each of our buildings. For the sake of our time, you have those full reports in front of you, and certainly our administrators are happy to answer any questions. But I'll start with Mr. Gump at the high school, and I've just asked each of our administrators to highlight one thing from their report to share with the board.
Okay, I will just begin with the high school principal schedule. The overview of it is once the building budget for next year is submitted, we then really turn the page for the course selection guide. So I'm proud to say the budget went in today. It was a really good feeling. And now, although we've done some pre-work with the course selection guide, I'm very excited to get going with department leads, with Mr. Moser, and with our teachers on creating that for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Gump. And if you're following along, you will see that we've asked administrators to report on things like attendance percentage, where they are with budgets, academic initiatives that are happening in their building. So as you peruse that, you can see a more kind of detailed review of all the things happening at that school level. I'll turn it over to Mr. Snover for the middle school.
Good evening. Two quick things that I'd like to highlight. First, I would like to thank our student council and Ms. Samados and Mr. Lombardo for putting on a really nice Veterans Day program this past week. We had probably about 25 local veterans that showed up for a breakfast and, got to be interviewed by students, and it's just a nice way to honor, our local heroes here in our community. The other thing that I'd like to point out to the board is under number 5, where you might see disciplinary data that may come across as high, and I want to point out that at the middle school, we've really worked hard on encouraging teachers to document pretty much every single thing that is going on that, is noteworthy, if it's a disruption in a classroom or somebody's not turning in their assignments. We want a paper trail. We want a documentation of that, so when it is time to meet with parents and conference, we can kind of go back and say, look, here are all the things that are happening. While that looks a little excessive in there, I did want to point out that the vast majority of them are really low-level things, in many cases don't result in any kind of like actual disciplinary action. It's a warning or a conversation, but again, we are asking our teachers document everything just so we all kind of have an overview of what's going on in the classrooms and with students. So if there were any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them in more detail.
Thank you. And Mrs. Willoughby works with both our high school and middle school students in her role in intervention and special ed.
Yes, and what I was going to speak on in terms of the report that was provided to you was the MTSS process and procedures that Alyssa and I have been working on K to 12. We are implementing and refining as we go with teacher input and working out the kinks. But so far, we have a total of 10 referrals at the secondary level and a total of 27 referrals coming in at the elementary level. So on a biweekly or monthly basis, we are meeting with teams, we are discussing interventions, we're collecting data, and all of this is then housed within Sapphire. So we have kind of a story of what the student has received in terms of intervention, both academically and behaviorally.
Thank you. Ms. Wenrick, is there anything to add at the elementary level?
Yeah, the other thing that we're working on is K through 12 procedures for emotional support, working on prevention, maintenance, and intervention. We're meeting monthly with the emotional support teachers and our intervention specialist to come up with protocols and guidelines with the correct verbiage that we want to use in different situations.
Thank you. And then we'll hear from Dr. Reinert and Mrs. Geis from the elementary perspective.
Thank you. At Liberty Valley, we're spending a lot of time talking about data, but one data point that I wanted to talk about specifically tonight that kind of gets overlooked, Mr. Snover had touched on it, is the disciplinary data. In terms of being a building principal, I spend a lot of time looking at trends related to our data, and from October 2nd until November 2nd, I was really looking at the referrals and incidences that were entered not only by our teachers but by myself, and finding patterns. So through the 51 instances of misconduct that were reported by our teachers and myself, there were 43 level 1 infractions, and level 1 just means conversations that the teachers may have had in terms of very, very minor things. And based on those infractions, I was seeing a pattern in terms of where these were happening within the school, outside of the school, arrival, dismissal, bus. And then because of the disciplinary infractions, we decided at Liberty Valley to have an entire positive behavior intervention and support reteach. So we spent November 3rd, the morning of November 3rd, actually going over with the students what it looked like to use their best throughout the building. I do have examples if anybody would like to look at them. We have posters that are everywhere in the building. I also developed lesson plans that went with different places. So this is a bus expectation. We were finding a lot of our instances of misconduct were happening on the bus. So Laura Reno actually allowed us to have buses in our building. We took the kids everywhere, cafeteria, what it looked like to use their best in the cafeteria, be respectful, encourage kindness, safety first, try their hardest. So not only were we going to the cafeteria, we literally took them on the bus. Teachers spent time providing lessons on what it looked like to use their best on the bus, in the cafeteria, in the hallway. So we spent an entire morning going over positive expectations and what we are expecting out of the students. And because we spent this time to model this with the students, I am happy to report that from November 3rd, which was the day that we retaught, we've only had 2 documentations of any type of misconduct since. So that is data that's showing that, even taking that time in the morning is already showing positive results in our building.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to highlight last week at the primary school, we held our grand lunches on November 6th, 7th, and 8th. We held them years ago prior to COVID. Each student was able to invite 2 adults. They were allowed to invite someone who's grand in their life, whether it's a grandparent, a mom, or dad. And we kept track of every person that came in the building, and there were over 600 people that came through our doors. So it was just great to be at DPS last week. Something else really quick too, our reading teachers are using a science of reading based curriculum. It is called U-Fly Foundations from the University of Florida. It is very rigorous, it's explicit, direct instruction. I have gotten to observe it many times, and I think we're going to see some very exciting.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ryan, if you could go to the next slide. Mrs. Marshall does have a slide for hers.
This is all in your packet and explains it really well, but I just wanted to highlight in Head Start right now, it is data time. So the kids, the data was collected when the kids were only in school 35 days. So we're trying to get a baseline of what they know coming in and where to begin working with them individually. So the graph on the left is where we are program-wide. This is 3-4-year-olds. This is dual language learners, children with IEPs. This is some children are with us the second year, some the first year. So we're taking all of that data and all of those areas to kind of see where we adjust education moving forward. So the classroom looks at their data, and they also look at it individually with child and program data. And then we also have this year an initiative, an academic initiative in literacy, and that is the graph on the right. We are working with Anne-Marie Cantori with coaching and professional development. We added Hegarty this year, and really honing in on literacy skills, sounds, lowercase, uppercase letters, starting to write their name. So this is the baseline data for the fall, and we are looking at that again in January and then in May. And hopefully you will see the below, which is red, meet is green, and then the orange is exceeds, and that you will see difference in the graph as the year goes on.
Thank you so much. And our final report this evening is from Mr. Ryan from our technology.
All right, thank you. Just real quick, first thing I got to say is when it comes to data, we are the original data nerds. Sorry, Jason. But we've been collecting data since probably once I got here back in 2008. So the one thing that I'm just going to go over real quick that we're proud of is, you know, as a group, and I have a fantastic staff, I want to put a shout out to Rich Wilson, Nick Truax, and John Wengren, who is going to retire, and I want to put out a shout out to John. We've been measuring data as we went along, and we're very proactive. As the administration goes and everything that happens, we try to stay ahead of the curve so we can basically have everything prepared and ready to go. So any initiative that is done throughout the district, we can do without a problem. So you can see some of the statistics. You know, we're up 99.99% of the time. And there's a whole lot of data we collect to verify that. We have, you know, good speed on our network. We have an incredible amount of devices and people that use our network on an every day-to-day basis. And you can see, you know, almost 3,500 devices and over 2,500 potential users. So, you know, it's pretty incredible when you look at, you know, we have a staff of 4. You know, actually, when it comes to the actual, you know, break fix, it's 2 guys, and then the network side, and then the data side. So we have 4 altogether. It's some pretty incredible stuff. And another thing, you know, the website, I want to thank Dr. Need for moving forward with that this year, and we saw some great numbers, or we're seeing some great numbers and showing that people are actually coming to our website now that we've done a big revamp. You know, and then when they're coming, they're staying, and they're staying for a considerable amount of times. Everything is excellent when you look at website statistics. And then our help desk calls right now, there's very few open. You know, we try to stay ahead of the curve. So, you know, like I said, a big shout out to, you know, one of the best, if not the best group of technology guys that I've ever worked with. And I think in this area, I could say it's one of the best. And that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the administrative team for taking the time to put the reports together, and also certainly for your daily hard work. Thank you, Mr. Moser, for all of your work and the curriculum and instruction presentation tonight. That concludes our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. 4.1, public comment, maximum of 3 minutes for agenda items only. Anyone want to speak on agenda items tonight? public? No? Okay, we'll move on. Any presentations, outside guests, number 5? No? Okay. School property and supplies, anything? No? Athletics and activities, 7.1, out-of-state trip. The board will take action to approve the out-of-state trip to Chincoteague Bayfield Station, Wallops Island, Virginia, for 16 students and 3 adults, leaving May 19, 2024, and returning May 22, 2024. This trip addresses biology and AP science standards. The cost is approximately $450 per student and $350 in transportation costs. Motion to approve.
Motion. Second.
Okay, get a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on this trip? Okay, Terry?
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Number 8, 8.1, academic affairs consent items. The board will take action to approve academic affairs items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, and 8.6. Excuse me. These are curriculum overview documents, second reading, all except 8.6, which is a first reading.
Can I pull some out?
Sure.
Can I pull out 8.2,
Mm-hmm.
8.5, and 8.6?
Okay. 8.2, 8.5, and 8.6 will not be consent. Any others? Okay, so we're going to move forward with the others. Any other comments or questions on those as consent items? Can we get a motion to approve the remainder of those that were not pulled out as consent items? Motion to approve. Got a motion from Mr. Clauser, second.
Second.
Dr. Green. Any questions or comments? Okay, Terry?
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Okay, the remainder of these, once again, was it 8.2, 8.5, and 8.6?
Right.
Okay. Mrs. Heater, any comments that you have on the 3?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest one that I want to talk about is 8.2.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted a little clarification from the board or anyone else that has insight to this, is the fact that in 2019, the district taxpayers paid $16,785 for FOSS science materials, and the teachers went through some very extensive training for this program. And then, I mean, I even remember when I was teaching at Valley in the fall of 2021, the materials were on the top shelf. However, I received a photo of all of the FOSS materials in dumpsters. It stated that they were had mold on them from being in a metal container. And I see in the summer of 2022, $89,846 was purchased a new science program. John Bickhart signed with Ricky Boyle, and Jason had explained to me that ESSER funds were used for this. But my question is, if that money was spent in 2019 and teachers had extensive training, why were all the materials not utilized when I was told that there were microscopes still in plastic that teachers were pulling out of the dumpsters and taking? And why wasn't it being utilized? If we're spending that much money on a curriculum and then more for training teachers, what happened to the curriculum that it wasn't utilized? Does anybody
You want to
know?
give an explanation of why they were disposed of? I think that's the first thing we should start with.
The explanation of why they were disposed of, they were stored in the C-can, the materials that were stored in the C-can. It certainly was not all of the FOSS materials. I don't know the extent of what was actually in there exactly. That was brought, the reality is the C-can had gotten moisture in it. There were things in there with mold, certainly. I don't know how many boxes of microscopes or anything. I don't know exactly what was in there. I do know that it was brought to the attention of Mr. George that, you know, Dr. Reinert received some questions from some teachers. She directed it to Mr. George. Mr. George said there is no way to guarantee that those things were safe to go back into the schools, into the hands of kids, given that they had been exposed theoretically to mold. So on my end, we did recommend the disposal of the contents of the sea can. And we did not actually go and look. We were told it was furniture and boxes of books, which certainly, if exposed to moisture and mold, certainly would have been something that would not have been salvageable in any way, shape, or form.
But how did it end up in the sea can instead of being used for the students?
That I cannot answer you. I was not here. I don't know.
That was prior to the current administration's
Correct.
choices, was it not?
Yes, but it should have been utilized. So my question in reference to that is, when we're doing this curriculum overview with this, and it says inspire science, so we are going to make sure that this is going to go through with fidelity, because obviously we purchased all of that FOSS material for thousands of dollars on taxpayers' money, and it wasn't utilized. And that's not fair to the students as well as the taxpayers. And I
Great.
know you weren't here, but I was just wondering if that could be clarified, why the material wasn't used and why it was placed in that can.
I do not have an answer as to why it was placed in that can. I do know that it's not all of the FOSS material, so I think you said 19,000 of worth of materials.
Well, I don't know what
Of
all is in
FOSS.
here, but that's quite a bit. And also with the
Right.
desks, there were desks thrown away, which again, you said that he was very particular with the mold. However, the CDC recommendations and the Environmental Protection Agency does have cleaning protocols for those. So I don't buy that, and it's just a shame that those desks were thrown away when they could have been at least given to families that could use them. So I think we can vote on that now. I just wanted the public to be aware of what happened.
And the mold that we're discussing is in a building that is not connected to.
It is not in the building, no.
It's an outbuilding.
It was a storage unit, essentially.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Green.
I'm just thinking back. Didn't we vote to dispose of what was in that can?
Correct.
Yes.
The board as a whole did, right?
We
I
did.
wasn't here. If I would have known that this was FOSS materials, but like Jason said, you just said that you didn't know what was in those boxes, right?
I did not know there were FOSS materials out there, no.
Correct.
Yeah, we were not made aware that it was curriculum
Correct.
items, except for just a few books. And I'm stating this off of, this was brought to the finance committee. And we were not, I'm gonna be honest with you, we were not made aware that there was desks or chairs or any other hardware. We were just made aware that it was some books that might have had some mold on it.
Look back at notes, I did believe we said furniture and books, but certainly in the future, we will always have an exact itemized list for you.
Absolutely.
And I have a question on that. I mean, did anybody verify on that there was mold besides our building and maintenance before?
So,
Like oversight of him?
the custodians in that building actually brought this to our attention very early on last year, and we spent some time finding out more about what was in the container. Obviously not enough to have a detailed itemized list, but items were put there back at COVID time, so we now have years of basically rain, moisture getting in on all of those items there. Not to mention there was still a cost associated with having that sea can located at Liberty Valley. So this was an effort to dispose of moldy items as well as not have that cost on our books anymore.
But they shouldn't have been in there in the first place.
And I don't know how
I know.
that happened.
That's what I'm wondering.
If I had to guess, it may have been with trying to make some spacing during COVID, because my understanding is that's when it happened, and there were some regulations about how far apart kids needed to be, those kinds of things. But Mr. Moser and I were not there at that time, so that's me just a hypothetical guess as to how those choices may have been made.
And then if it's okay with you, Wayne, if
Yeah.
I can just continue with the rest and we can vote on all of them?
You want to go on all of them now?
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
No,
Sure.
I just want to comment on a
Oh,
couple
yeah,
more, and then
definitely.
we
No,
can
I'd
just
prefer you
group
do it
those
that way.
together.
No, go ahead,
So
Jean.
with 8.5, the high school specials, if you could just take a look at the business and accounting 2 one, it's really not clear for parents. It's not, if we're putting these online for parents, it's not telling them what it's all about. It's very generic. And then also with that, the high school AP French, if they could put the unit in English as well as Spanish 3, put it in English so parents can at least understand what that is instead of in Spanish and French. So I mean, I don't think everybody's family can read Spanish and French, but at least the unit name should be in English. And then also with the 8.6 kindergarten to 8th grade, again, with the 3 to 8 Spanish, if they could put the English unit names and Spanish to 8th grade, add the English names.
What do you mean by generic? 8.5?
It doesn't really tell you what the course is. If
Okay.
you read them all, like
Right.
they're very well done. Like
Mhm.
they're very well done, except that one, it's not really a
Doesn't have-
course overview.
Doesn't have the detail.
No. If
Okay.
you read it as a parent, you wouldn't have any clue
Okay.
of what it is.
Okay. So are you asking that we modify that before we vote on it? Are you looking to table it?
I trust that they'll fix it.
Okay.
I'm gonna trust.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? So we're going to move on those together.
On the 3.
On to 3.
8.2,
We're not asking to table anything or
No.
do anything
Nope,
further with
just-
it. All right, appreciate it. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Any questions, comments, or further discussion? Okay, Terry?
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Klauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Number 9, School/Community Relations, the DASD Hall of Fame Committee. The board will take action to approve David Ackley, Kelly Michaels, Ken Williams, and Jason Hanley, excuse me, as initial representatives for the Danville Area School District Hall of Fame Committee.
Motion.
Athletic Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Athletic Hall of Fame. I just like Kelly Michaels is here. I want to thank her. She was at the last athletics meeting when we said we're still short members, putting your name in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And not to shortchange the other individuals who have stepped up and volunteered.
Okay. You get a motion?
Yes,
You got a
Mr.
motion? You got a
Vognetz.
second? Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Is there a term for how long they serve, or is it just as long as they?
Yes, no, it's in the bylaws. I don't recall exactly
I
offhand,
believe that
I'll
it's
be
3,
honest.
but it is in the bylaws that
Yes.
we've
Yeah,
approved.
I remember we approved
And
the
those
bylaws
are
a few
available
months ago.
online as well, too.
Where do we move from here with this after these people are hopefully approved? What's the next step?
Next step would be to hold an initial meeting. We still have some vacant seats, so hopefully we would be able to, by December, bring to the board the rest, flesh out the rest of that committee, and then in, early January, start holding the meetings.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Terry?
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Klauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 10.1, Finance Report, and this will be run by our business manager, correct?
Yes. Just a couple highlights. Tax collection through the end of October, we were at 95% of our collection, what we anticipated. Thanks to our tax collectors and Beth Norman in my office doing an excellent job at this point. Interest earnings, with the market change, we're seeing a significant increase in our interest income. We've almost met our budget goal for this fiscal year already, so that's a great thing, thanks to the interest market for earning on our accounts. Second item on there, bills for October, you'll see it's roughly about $6.4 million we're approving here tonight. The month of October, we pay our debt, bond debt. So the month for bond interest and principal is roughly a $2.5 million hit for the month of October. The next one will come in March, which is just our interest payments. It's a lot lower, but that's why you see a significant increase in our bills for tonight. Also, we're still paying on the project at the Votech. That was approximately about $800,000 that we paid for the project. So that's why our bill seems to be higher for the month of October when you compare it to other months.
Where do we stand with that overall, Mike? The Votech project?
The Votech, I'm not sure how many more payments are left. They
Yeah.
should be almost finishing up.
That's what I was curious
Yeah,
about. And if
so
you don't know now, that's fine. But
I
if
don't
we
have
could-
the, but I'll have that for the next meeting.
That'd be fine.
That funding was obviously part of the project funds, and the project funds will reimburse the general fund on that. So just so you're aware of that.
Thank you.
There's an item you'll be asking for approval. It's Conrad Siegel. It's for our Affordable Care Act proposal. This is for our healthcare 1095s and so forth. They monitor and help us with filing those with the IRS. We have to do this on an annual basis. The base cost has not changed since last year, so I'm asking for approval of that this evening. The tax resolution is our Act 1, our budget tax resolution for the 24-25 school year is on for approval tonight. Basically, that's stating that we will not raise taxes above 6.1%. That's what the maximum allowed increase would be. Obviously, I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for approval so we can begin the process of doing our budget. Due to time restraints this year, it has to be done in early January with the holidays and everything, so that's the reason we have it on tonight's meeting agenda. The Act 1 index, looking at prior history, back in 2013-14, it was 2%. Last year, it was 4.1%. Next year, 24-5, it is 6.1%. What that equates to is approximately, if the board would go to 6.1% to generate with today's rates, is about a $900,000 increase in revenue. Millage-wise, today we are at 13.04. Maximum that the district will be permitted to go to is roughly 13.84%. Again, I'm not asking for that increase. It's just to start the budget process. The administrators are gathering their information, and we're beginning the budget approval process, and we'll go before the finance meeting for the next several months, and the next 6 months whittling down our budget.
On time.
And that 6.1% is a state-established number.
Yes,
Correct.
I'm not dictating. That's
No.
every.
That comes-
No, that's given. Yeah,
That's high.
Yes, very high. I've never seen that high
No,
before. To be
I
honest
haven't
with
either.
you.
Yeah.
The
There are
other-
some higher.
What's it?
There are some higher.
No, there's
There
some
are
districts
across
that
the
are higher.
districts that are
higher, yeah.
It's hard to believe. The last item I'm asking for approval is bank account consolidation. We have a couple accounts that are we're getting charged service fees, and basically we're consolidating accounts and moving savings to a different type of account that we will no longer get charged service fees. So that's another item that you'll see approval tonight, if I can have that item. Other than that, anybody else have any questions for me? Thank you.
Point 4, correct? Yeah, okay. 10.4, bill, excuse me, bills for payment. Board will take action to approve the bills for payment for October 5th, 2023 through November 8th, 2023 as presented. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
And a second? Okay. Questions or comments on the bills? Thank you, Mr. Sokolowski, for your report. And Terry?
Mr. Reichard,
Abstain.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Clauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Consulting services of Conrad Siegel Actuaries. The board will take action to approve the proposed consulting services of Conrad Siegel Actuaries for the 2023 ACA employer reporting at a cost of $6,000. Additional fees, if we use them for other areas beyond the scope of services, would be as follows. Consulting actuary, $365 per hour. Benefit consultant, $315 per hour. Associate actuary, $275 per hour. And actuarial benefit analyst, $205 to $235 per hour. We get a motion to approve.
Motion?
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments for anyone in our administration, in particular Mr. Sokolowski, regarding Conrad Siegel? Okay.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Clauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 10.6, tax resolution. The board will take action upon the recommendation of the business manager to approve the board resolution that states the district will not raise taxes for the 2024-2025 school year above the Act 1 index of 6.1%.
Motion.
Second.
Any questions, comments on this? This puts us on the timeline. I think we talked before that we don't have to have a preliminary budget done for several months. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Clauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 10.7, bank account reconfiguration. The board will take action upon the recommendation of the business manager to close the Fulton Bank Commencement Awards Savings Account 20 due to now being depleted and inactive, and changing the Fulton Bank Kenneth Bills Memorial School Fund Savings Account 57 in parentheses to a government interest checking account to avoid bank service fees. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments on this? Okay. Terry?
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Clauser,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.1, personnel consent items. We have 11.2 to 11.16, if you want to take a look at them. Excuse me. Anything that anyone would like to pull? Okay. I'd like to pull 11.11. Resignation of Carleen Klana. Okay. And we will need a motion in a second for the others. Do you want me to start with 11.11? How do we want to proceed? Usually these don't start at the superintendent level. I'll say why I pulled this out. At the risk of being, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody, but Coach Klein has been here for an awful long time, and I just wanted to really make a public statement about everything she has meant to this district and quality of what she's brought on a day-to-day basis in every program she's ever touched. And she's also come in here a lot before I think most of you remember as a strong Title IX advocate and an advocate for all the female sports that we have, and I just thought it needed to be recognized. So not only has she been highly successful as a coach, I don't know how many district titles they've had, it's quite a few, but also had a huge impact on a lot of other things that have happened here in the district for our athletes, and I just want to make sure that that was not gone unnoticed, and once again, recognize everybody that leaves and not disrespectful of anybody, but I just thought that that needed to be said. So thank you for indulging me on that comment. And
I do want to add, this is not a resignation. She put in a retirement, correct?
back here.
In her letter, she did state retirement because it's not a member of the union. I think it gets listed this way, but certainly would want to acknowledge again, like Mr. Brookhart did,
Yeah.
that she's had tremendous service to the district, and we're certainly so thankful for everything she's done
Yes.
to start a really successful girls lacrosse program here.
Okay. So we can move on the other ones.
Okay.
Correct? Terry, where are we? Do we do a motion in a second, or do I need that yet?
We need a motion and a second.
Motion and a second on all the consent items, and we can do Carleen separate since I pulled it. Motion from Mr. Reichert, second from Mr. Clauser. Any other comments or questions on the consent items? Terry, go ahead.
Dr. Faulkner,
Yes.
Dr. Green,
Yes.
Mrs. Heater,
Yes.
Mr. Reichard,
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz,
Yes.
Mr. Clauser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.11, the board will take action to accept the resignation of Carleen Klena as girls lacrosse coach effective November 1st, 2023. Motion to approve.
I motion.
Second.
Second.
Dr. Green. Any questions or comments beyond what was previously stated? Okay. Terry?
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Point 17, correct? 11.17, the bocce ball coach. The board will take action to approve Sarah Klein as bocce ball coach for the 2024 season. Stipend is $1,000. We paid at the end of the season. The district will be reimbursed for the stipend by the Special Olympics. Motion to approve.
I motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay. Terry?
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper. Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.18, assistant winter coaches. The board will take action to approve the 2023-24 assistant winter coaches list as presented. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? Terry?
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.19, DHS Athletics Social Media Coordinator. Board will take action to approve Lauren Parker as the DHS Athletics Social Media Coordinator with a yearly stipend of $500.
Motion.
Motion. Second.
Second.
Reichard. Questions or comments?
I would just like to share with the board and with the public that we do have a social media coordinator for each building with that same stipend. So you can follow all 4 of our buildings on Instagram, and those Instagram accounts do feed into the main page of our webpage. So encourage you to follow us both ways. We've just added a Danville Athletics Instagram page, so that the Danville High School sometimes highlights athletics as well, but now you can just follow Danville Athletics. That Instagram account will also feed right into our main page. So you could follow through Instagram or on the website, and super thankful to Mrs. Parker for her leadership in keeping that social media account up to date as we move forward.
Thank you. Okay. We had a motion and a second, correct?
Yes.
Go ahead, Terry.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.20, Head Start lead teacher. The board will take action to approve Jamie Fogelman as Head Start class tag leader and trainer with a one-time stipend of $500.
Motion.
Second.
Questions or comments? Terry, go ahead.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Assistant advisor positions, winter track. The board will take action to approve adding boys and girls winter track assistant advisor positions with a stipend of $500 each.
Motion.
Motion. Second.
Second.
Second. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
The girls just had a pretty big victory recently, didn't they? A few of the runners. I'm blanking on where it was that they had.
Hershey?
Was it in Hershey?
The state.
They won
the
states.
state
They won
cross
states.
I
country
wanted
meet
to
in Hershey.
acknowledge that.
Yep.
Yes, and we'll be inviting them to the December meeting so they can wear their
Awesome.
medal for us,
Mhm.
the bling.
So sorry, there were so many things on my mind. I knew they had just won a major
They
victory,
did.
and I wanted to acknowledge that, but I couldn't remember.
The girls won states. The boys were third,
The
right?
boys were third in
Which is
state,
awesome.
yes,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
And certainly many of those students then participate in winter track, and so with the numbers we were seeing, the suggestion, that's where this item came from, to support our head coach or our head advisors.
Yeah. Mr. Gump? Yeah, Mr. Gump. Great. All
That's
right.
great.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Mrs. Cooper. Yes. Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 1122, voluntary transfer. The board will take action to approve/grant the request of Ms. Jessica Knoll to voluntarily accept the cyber education position within the teacher's bargaining unit effective December 8, 2023. Ms. Knoll's placement on the salary schedule should be step 13, masters plus 45 of the 23-24 salary schedule. Ms. Knoll has signed an agreement confirming her request for a voluntary transfer and a return to the bargaining unit. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Motion, Dr. Green. Second.
Second.
Second, Ms. Cooper. Any questions or comments? Okay, Terry?
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.23, assistant middle school principal. The board will take action to approve Tom Haravi as middle school assistant principal at a yearly salary of $83,000 with Act 93 benefits effective December 11, 2023.
Motion.
Second. Okay.
Second.
Yep. Questions or comments? All right. Thank you.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes, and Mr. Haravi is obviously here tonight.
Yes.
Congratulations from the board. We're looking forward to having you in the administrative ranks. Anything else from anyone about this? We're good?
Just would like to say congratulations, and we're excited to have you on the team. Thanks for being here this evening.
Echo that exactly. Yep.
I also owe you some money for the middle school projects. I haven't forgot. I'm just clarifying. I've been busy. I haven't started working on raising that funds, but I will get you your money.
Okay. 11.24. The board will take action to approve an agreement between Danville Area School District and Melissa Nugent to become a 60% of full-time teacher effective January 3rd, 2024. Motion to approve. Second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Terry?
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Transfer. 11.25, the board will take action to approve the transfer of Ken Schmidt from custodian to custodial supervisor/maintenance at a yearly salary of $50,000 effective November 14, 2023. Custodial supervisor maintenance is a non-bargaining unit position. Motion to approve. Mr. Clauser, second.
Second.
Dr. Green. Questions or comments? Okay. Terry?
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
No.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
No. And I want to point out that I'm not familiar with Mr. Schmidt at all. It has nothing to do with the person. It's more not having the clarity I think that we need right now within that area.
I do agree with that. I think Mr. George would be perfect to have the explanation of why we're choosing Mr. Schmidt.
11.26, custodian. The board will take action to approve the employment of Kimberly Springman as a custodian at the middle school at the contracted hourly rate of $13.70, effective October 23rd, 2023. Motion to approve.
A motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay. Terry?
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper. Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.27, the board will take action to approve the employment of April D. Walt as a custodian at the high school at the contracted hourly rate of $13.70 effective October 23rd, 2023. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.28, new hire custodian. The board will take action to approve the employment of Matthew Wolf as a custodian at Liberty Valley Intermediate School at the contracted hourly rate of $13.70 effective October 23rd, 2023. These are all retroactive, obviously. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Questions or comments? Terry?
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 11.29, new hire maintenance. The board will take action to approve the employment of Scott Reinecker to fill the maintenance position at the contracted hourly rate of $15.55 an hour effective December 5th, 2023. Motion to approve.
I motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay. Terry?
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper. Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 12.1, Title I, Parent and Family Engagement Policy. The board will take action to approve the Title I Parent and Family Engagement Policy as presented. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Questions or comments?
I'd just like to explain, the parent and family engagement policy is something that needs to be approved each year following seeking stakeholder feedback on the policy itself, any revisions, anything that might be in there. So the vote can't happen until that takes place. That meeting took place actually on Halloween in this very room. That meeting went very well, and so now it's up for approval.
Okay, thank you. Gary, you got a motion, a second?
Yep.
And you need a vote?
Ready?
Okay.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper. Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. 12.2, expulsion agreement. Board will take action to approve the expulsion agreement for student A1322 for a minimum of 30 school days beginning November 20th, 2023 through January 17th, 2024. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments? I have a quick question I think I should ask. It's a minimum of, but we do have a way to determine.
Yes, there's
You don't have to
particular
specifically
requirements
tell
that
me
the
what, but we
student,
do have that,
particular
correct?
requirements the student and family must meet to
Okay.
stay there.
All right. Good enough. Okay.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Reichard.
Yes.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Transportation, 13.1, 2023, 2024 bus driver list. The board will take action upon the recommendation of the superintendent to approve the bus driver lists for the 2023-24 school year as presented, pending the receipt of all required clearances and documentation. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Questions or comments on the bus driver list? Gary, you got it. You're up.
Mr. Reichard.
Aye.
Mr. Vognetz.
Yes.
Mr. Clauser.
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
Dr. Faulkner.
Yes.
Dr. Green.
Yes.
Mrs. Heater.
Yes.
Mr. Brookhart.
Yes. Anything else that we should have had in the agenda? Any modifications or additions at this point? We good with all that? So we move into the board concerns? Okay. Board concerns and items for the next meeting and agenda 14.1. Does anyone here have anything they would like brought up as a board member? Because I have a couple. I'll try to keep them quick. Go ahead.
Now, with next month's meeting,
Yeah.
I know we talked about inviting the girls, and, you know, next month's meeting is already going to be longer due to reorganization. I'm just thinking that January would probably be a better month.
I'm glad you brought that up. That kind of led right into some of the things I was going to say. Can you hear me? Okay. In December, we have board reorganization. We have 7 board members determined, I believe, and we'll need to make 2 appointments, correct?
Yes.
And we get 30 days to do that, and if we don't do it within 30 days, it goes to a judge. My assumption is, and I don't know that this is true for sure, that that starts with reorganization, not from the date of the election. But could we, Terry, could we get that clarified as the board secretary when our 30-day clock starts to tick? Because I'm not, again, positive of this, but I think from reorganization to the January meeting, that could be more than 30 days. So we would either have to have a special meeting, or we would have to take care of it that night. With some of us being new, that's going to be kind of a tall order. But if it is possible for us to put something out that says we anticipate this and then consider it reorganization and move on it, we kind of would like to know that. I know that's a lot, but.
Get that information and then we can make that decision.
Yeah. Is that anything, does that in any way disturb anybody? Does that all make sense? Okay. Because we obviously would like to take care of the appointments here as opposed to sending it to a judge if we can, but if that happens, it happens. But I don't want it just to be because of a lapse of time or we didn't understand, okay? And I also would like to thank Dr. Faulkner and Ms. Cooper, Mr. Klauser, Mr. Huron. He and I spoke earlier today. It has been such a pleasure working with all of you. I mean that sincerely, and it's been great. Really picked up an awful lot of knowledge from being around all of you, and I think we saw a lot of things happen that were good for the district and good for kids. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll run into each other in the future. But you know, it was great working with all of you. See what else I have here. Act 93, I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware that previously we have looked into and started the discussions with Act 93 a little earlier because it was an election year. We did not. Act 93 is the administrative compensation plan. It is not a full negotiation, nor is it similar to a collective bargaining situation, but it is how our administrators are compensated, and we are about 6-7 months, I guess, from being expired, so we need to get on that and start to talk about that in December. I think last time the committee was Dr. Green and Mr. Vognitz and myself, so we need to make that a priority. That does not include the business manager, assistant, or superintendent, but it does include all of our administration. On my list here, see what else I have. Terry, we took care of that. We did have an executive session earlier tonight. We talked about personnel and student issues, and we will adjourn to executive session. After the meeting is over, we'll go back into executive session briefly. Obviously, some people are departing, but we just wanted to talk about some things before everybody's gone, and then have a smooth transition to our new board. And finally, I'm going to ask this, if we could, we had some questions tonight. Mrs. Heater brought some things to us I think that were worthy of more background. Could we please have our Director of Buildings and Grounds start to come to our meetings? I think it would really help a lot. Mr. Reichert's doing the report from the committee and talking about potential things that need to be done in the future. I just think it would really help to have him here as an Act 93 employee. That's just me personally. If I'm off base, I apologize.
No, I don't think that you are bad
Okay.
at it.
All right, I appreciate that. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, actually, thanks to you and Rich for serving as the officers of the board and the head of the board, because I guess technically the term will come to the end at the end of this, and then we'll redecide with the new constituted board.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you for what you guys have done in this context.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. And these positions are vacant also. All the officer positions, all the committees, all start over, reorganization. So we don't know where everybody's going to be, but it's been nice to be in this role, and I appreciate everyone's support through it. And I promise that I'm not going to let a meeting go by without mentioning the Heartlands. So please indulge me again. Jason, I appreciate all the study you've done and all the communications you've had. I'm not at all critical of that conference as it stands. I just think our kids are traveling too far, and it's hurting us academically and fiscally. Our sports are great, certainly not hurting our success. They're fantastic. But I appreciate the fact that you continue to talk with people about maybe ways to do that, so kids don't need to be released from school so early, so often, and also so that we can save a little money in transportation. And I sent an email about, I understand sometimes there's a time you need to travel. I just think it's happened maybe a little bit too much.
Yeah, and I would just say, the athletic directors from the PHAC had a meeting a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago now. I did attend and speak to them. I said that in short order, I'd be sharing with them an analysis of some transportation and some transportation costs, and also some time issues. When I spoke at that meeting, I identified, there's really three things that we're looking at here. One is, first of all, the loss of instructional time that students have when they have to leave early repeatedly throughout the school year for athletic events because they're traveling more than 40 minutes away in many cases. Two, the return home, improving upon students not coming home so late at night. And then the third is obviously transportation costs as well. In an initial analysis of 6 different districts in the PHAC, what we found was that a proposed realignment based on geography could save, at a minimum, the lowest average school I saw was like 25%, and the highest was over 50% in transportation costs inside the division. That's not even accounting for costs that could be saved in traveling outside of the division because of how many games some teams have to pick up when, right now our current schedule, in sports with 3 divisions, there are some sports that only have 6 teams. That gives you 5. If you play each team twice, that's 10 out of 22. So we're still left having to schedule over half of our actual schedule, which leads to things such as long trips to Hollidaysburg and Bellefonte, and just when, you could reserve those for some special occasions potentially. Not to say nobody should ever travel to Williamsport to play, but it should be something that is like the one thing on the schedule that coach and that program really want to do. So I'll be sharing that information out in a more formalized and public manner with other districts as well.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Clauser?
So, as pointed out earlier, this is my last meeting here, and I want to tell everybody it was great working with you. I did enjoy being here most of the time. I just chose not to run because I'm retired, my wife just retired, and I got grandbabies coming by the bushels, and I love it. But there's some things that we actually set out to do when I first started on the board. I think we accomplished some of those, not all of them. I would like to see that. I actually called Rich and asked for the list that we had actually put together. I can't find it. My organizational skills aren't good at all. I was kind of hoping he could, but apparently he's like me. But we do. That list is around here somewhere, and they're reasonable goals. They couldn't be accomplished in 2 years, but maybe in 4 or 6, they certainly can. I just believe in that list, and there are some things on there that would make this school district not good, but outstanding. I remember, I am not from the Danville School District. I was born and raised in a little hole called White Deer. And when my children were born, my wife is an investigator, and she checked into every school in the area. Some were convicted, some were exonerated. This was the one she chose. And I would like to see that back to that level again, where people are moving into this district just for this school district, like we did. And I think it can be done. One of my biggest things, I'm cheap. Everybody knows it. The budget was my thing. We did a great job. Sandy did a great job on that contract. It put us, what was it, $1.5 million to the good in 6 years at the end of the contract?
It was more than that. But
Yeah. So when we mentioned the 6.1% increase before I realized what that was, my blood pressure started to go up a little bit. I don't know that we're going to need any tax increase this year. And if we do have one, I'll be sitting in that seat asking why. But again, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. Keep working on those goals, and this is going to be awesome in here. My grandkids are going to come to this school. I just know it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you stepping in as president at a very tough time, too. It was great.
Yeah, that was a little rough.
Yeah. Sam, mental health and everything you did, and Sherry with the athletic committee, and, you know, it was areas, and, you know, in order to get to the point where we are a great district, and I think, you know, we all take pride in this community, sometimes you have to have uncomfortable conversations, which, Mrs. Heater, I appreciate the fact that you bring the information you brought. It's how we get better, it's how we learn things, and we need that. We need that perspective, and we need those discussions. Sometimes they're not comfortable, but the intent is to get better. Round, okay. Anything else from the board? Public comment. We have some people here tonight. Anybody have a comment? Mr. Height?
Yeah, kid. Your mic?
Yeah, just pull it till that turns green, down at the bottom.
And state your name also, please.
There you go.
Hi, evening. Tom Height. I had a couple things I was hoping this group could maybe I'm not informed on enough, but maybe help with. It's a little bit of mental health, more so just issues that I've noticed with my kids are in grades 3 through 6, so obviously a lot of this deals with them. The models and procedures are there. I feel like there's some things that might be slipping by that we could possibly do a little bit better at. I know it seems minor, but kids' playground equipment at Liberty Valley, obviously needing done. The one thing I also noticed is with a lot of the turnover lately with teachers, whether it's gym teachers, music teachers, teachers in general, I feel like some things are being passed by, shortened, or sometimes classes even canceled. I know you have gym music teachers running between schools, and sometimes that leads to delays or cancellations of classes. And just know from what my kids have come home and told me that, hey, my first 3 music classes were canceled, and I just signed up for band. That's pretty disappointing. And then also to have recess or gym classes reduced or canceled due to teachers running back and forth. I feel like that's also something, again, that may seem minor, but when they're your kids, those are important topics that you feel like could lead to a better day. And one other thing too that has been a strong issue, at least I live over in Riverside. There are 65 to 70 kids on one school bus in the mornings. A kindergartner on that run has an hour and 10-minute ride one way. So they no longer go on their assigned stop. The parents take them, or they go to another stop that's a shorter ride for their child. But from my perspective, it's an issue because you've got 3 kids in nearly every seat. You had backpacks, lunch boxes, and now band instruments. It's a crummy way to start and end a day. So I would just wanted to bring that forward because I think that's a big deal to a 3rd through 6th grader, let alone a kindergartner, having that long of a bus ride. I don't know how to say this, but the minor bus accident at the school was an issue with me because I was actually talking to the officer as his vehicle was hit. I bring it up because I hope the school can review that specific driver, because it wasn't just the issue of driving, but how he handled the situation after, which I hope you're aware of. That was very concerning, only because I was talking to the officer as his vehicle was hit, and he told me what happened afterwards, and it was very concerning. His attitude towards the officer and description of the incident just felt like that needed to be said here. I wanted to bring a totally separate issue to the academics meeting, but we haven't had one. And the report cards of the 1, 2, 3 grading. I'm not educated in that area, but as a parent, I thought 1 through 4 was not real great, and I think 1 through 3 is even worse. I feel like it doesn't give parents an accurate reading of where their child's at. I feel honestly like it undermines the whole system, the educational system. I feel it undermines students and teachers, where if you have a poor student, he needs to know he's not doing well. If you have a student that is doing well, you have now taken the 4 off of that list, so he no longer exceeds the standard. So now he or she is just going to meet it. So the 1 through 3 was a big concern, and my first notice of that was just a week ago, as many parents. And I wanted to bring that up at the academics meeting, but since we didn't have it, that's why I do it here. So again, I'm not privy to the background on that, but as a parent was very shocked to see that in the first report card and not real happy, and I know others aren't either. Wayne, I know you talked about getting to the bottom of why some students or enrollment may be down, reducing, but I can tell you in the past week, some of the parents I've talked to, going homeschooling has been a real discussion because of this new grade system.
I appreciate you brought that part of it up, because when we go through our enrollment report at the beginning, the one thing that we don't really dive into much is homeschool. We have a lot of homeschooled kids here. I did go through the enrollment report. I'm not sure I know all the reasons why. I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm also glad you brought up the primary, because the hardest place sometimes for us to assess is what's happening at the primary, because there's no test. They don't start testing till 3rd grade, and that's where Mrs. Heater comes in. And it is a focus area, and I'm glad you brought up report cards. Do you have anything to say about the report cards? And I'll give the floor back to you.
No
yeah,
problem.
we're actually working through some things with that. Just so you are aware, that I also do want to let you know this was not brought up at academic affairs meeting, so I was not aware of all of these changes. Just to let you know, but now that we are aware, we are working diligently to put systems in place so you as a parent can accurately have an understanding of where your child is at. And if, that is something that we'll be working through with the affairs meeting. But again, I totally agree with you when I saw the report cards, which I saw them maybe like the week before they went out. And I had issues with them as well.
I just have to apologize to you, because I'm part of the reason the academic affairs meeting didn't happen.
Well,
I
I wanted to bring it up there.
So I apologize.
That's okay.
That you had planned. Sometimes patient care comes before other duties.
Understand. No, but
So,
and
just wanted
knowing
to
I didn't
apologize.
have any background, but obviously if Mrs. Heater doesn't, I won't either. But I felt like it was a better discussion there, but
I just didn't want you to think we canceled it, because we knew you were coming.
that's okay. That's quite all right.
No.
But my main concern is I feel there's no analysis left for a parent to really have, and I feel like with all the time kids are spending on testing, and there's not much of an evaluation to be made as a parent when it's a 1, 2, or a 3, and to also take away from these kids to strive for. I mean, at least they had a 4. Now they don't even have that. Yeah. I feel like is a real concern, and I think it gives both students and teachers something to strive for. But I'm really not a fan of this 1, 2, 3.
So I do think there are, with the elementary kids, the Dibble scores sent home with them as well.
Correct.
And so I know, at least for my
NWEA
children,
map.
that when I look at that is actually, for me, for my kids that are far more helpful in understanding where my child is at in a lot of ways than grades have ever been for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may want to take a close look on that. And I'm sure there are people, if they're not exactly intuitive to understand, in all honesty. But I know they were sent home because I saw them in my own home.
Yes.
It might be worth, if you really want to get an in-depth look into how your child is doing, talk to the teacher about what those measurements actually mean for your child.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, I mean, I probably shouldn't share what my personal child is doing, But there were some, in my mind, some discrepancies between the way that those scores came across and how my child appeared to be doing with the grades, because the grades just aren't granular enough, and there's no real way to make them that granular.
Right.
But the scores were much more helpful in sort of elucidating for me where I needed to work with my child, where I needed to have a discussion with the teacher surrounding it. So if you're feeling a little bit like, and I don't have any direct opinion on 3 versus 4 or any of that, but if you really want to have a deeper understanding, that may be one of the places to go to.
No, thank you. We did, and that's where the parent-teacher conferences were great that we did last week, because
we
we
found it
dove
very
into
helpful as
that
well.
with them, so that was helpful.
But I think, Tom, too, what you're saying is we are and have to be standards aligned.
Yeah.
And there's many standards that relate way above DIBELS. So, and I think that's what you're seeing as well. And I think to give a clear understanding of the standards and understanding the report card, I know, like, at least at the primary level a little bit earlier, so parents have an understanding, could have been warranted as well, for
Okay.
sure, a discussion, so.
I hope people can see by the detail that was in Mr. Moser's report tonight that we're definitely on it and taking it very seriously, and it's something that we're confident we're going to make some progress on it. The report cards, I know, I've heard about them as well, so I get you. You make a good point.
You've
Go ahead.
certainly,
Do you have any-
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You've shared some really important things, and I'd just like to name that when in going through here, we are looking at additional playground equipment at Liberty Valley, so you'll see that coming. When you were talking about some schedule changes at Liberty Valley, I'd be happy for us to discuss that, and it would probably be great if we involved Dr. Reinard to understand specifically what's happening, because I don't necessarily have an answer to each of those specific instances, but I can understand why you would have concern there. So I'd love to better understand the concerns so we can rectify that.
Yep.
And in terms of a bus route, Laura Renno, our Director of Transportation, or I would be happy to talk to a family if there's a specific concern about their route. So I think it's fair.
That was one point, but I think the fact that there are nearly 3 kids per seat on one bus.
I would
for
say
this
that
route.
wouldn't necessarily be true for all of our routes. So if there's a specific concern about a route, I'd be happy to talk to you kind of privately about that or with Laura, so that if there's a situation for us to rectify. And we can certainly put together information to share publicly about report cards for our next meeting as part of our superintendent report. But it's certainly important to me that you specifically as a dad, you know, being a parent in the district, understand where your children are at. So in addition to us talking with Dr. Reinard about those schedule changes and those things, be happy to further look at data on your children and make sure that you and your wife feel equipped to support them and help them in any way that you can.
Yep, thank you then. That sounds
Thank
good.
you. Appreciate you coming out. Thank you. Anyone else have public comment tonight? Okay. Anything else from any member of the board? We are going to exec session after. There will be no more business conducted, so we are going to adjourn the meeting, go to executive session, and we will adjourn here in a second. One last thing I wanted to say is, on the backs of everything we said here, I had the opportunity to go in the high school office, and there's a nice plaque about 2017 with Danville as #1 in virtually everything in this region, and I'd want to see us get back there, and I think we're on the right track to get there. So keep up the good work, and let's move forward, and thank you for everybody's perspective. And motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second. We're adjourned.